Hey everybody, it's the Herb Guy with the Elder Herb Shop, and welcome back to Where Science Meets Nature, a channel where we discuss the medicinal value of plants and other natural substances found in nature all around us, with a little bit of science behind it. And for this video, I'm not going to talk about plants at all. I would like to talk about a hot button topic, to mask or not to mask. Now, unless you've been living in a box, you're probably already aware that there are two groups in the United States right now. Well, realistically, there's a heck of a lot more than just two groups, but for the purpose of this video, there are two groups in America right now. One is adamantly for wearing a mask, and one that is adamantly against wearing a mask. If you're either person, this video could come in handy for you. Now, part of the issue with wearing masks, or being mandated to wear masks, from my perspective, is that governments aren't really all that reliable. You have the FDA that has changed its stance on the coronavirus at least a half a dozen times since it began back in, December? CDC changes its recommendations. The government itself doesn't know, and the reason why is because general consensus in science is there just isn't enough information about the coronavirus to be able to make any type of determining factors. However, the government still keeps pushing studies that have been called into question by peers. The problem with the current studies is, A, they're less than a year old. B, they have been peer-reviewed and found that their methodology and their science is somewhat inaccurate. That's Hannah, by the way. So, let's go back to the start, though. Why wear a mask at all? Well, when the virus first came out, you were supposed to wear a mask to protect yourself. Wear a mask, you won't get the coronavirus. Wear a mask, you won't get the coronavirus. That's Sophie. And later on, that morphed into, well, if you don't wear a mask, you're going to kill grandma, which is a pretty bold statement. So you have people that are adamantly wearing masks. You have stores that are making people wear masks just to come in and shop, because in theory, you're protecting other people. The current suggestions on how to stop or prevent the spread of coronavirus is to wash your hands and wear a mask. So I'll touch on the first thing, washing your hands. Do you wash your hands? I see a lot of nods there. Yeah, I wash my hands. Okay, that's great. Do you wash your hands properly? Do you wash your hands the way that you're recommended to wash your hands every time you touch something? Probably don't. Now, I've gone ahead and included a link in the description below in regards to how to properly wash your hands. And if you're honest with yourself, you can look at that video and go, yeah, I guess I don't really wash my hands all that well at all. So, strike one, right? Most people don't wash their hands right, if they wash their hands at all. Part two, government says you should wear a mask because it helps. The downside to that is, even the experts have stated that the mask doesn't necessarily help prevent the spread. Or it does help, but not as much as people think. Even Dr. Fauci stated, simply in a statement, wearing a mask is mostly symbolic. So let's talk about the masks that you wear. Who wears an N95 respirator every day, every time you go out somewhere? Raise your hand. Probably not very many. Why? Because those particular masks are reserved for medical professionals. Yeah, here. Rotten birds. So, N95 mask, people are wearing those, even if you are wearing that. You don't necessarily protect other people from getting the coronavirus by wearing an N95 mask. Why is that, you ask? Well, an N95 mask protects up to 0.3 microns, which is pretty small. 0.3 microns, a third of a micron. The downside to that particular math is that the coronavirus is 0.125 microns in diameter, about a third less than the smallest hole in an N95 respirator. If you don't have an N95 respirator, you're probably like, well, I don't have one of those, man, but I do have a surgical mask, and okay, that's cool too. Do you wear the surgical mask properly? Are you the kind of person that keeps it over your nose and makes sure that there's no gaps? Probably not. So your argument to that would be, well, I don't need all of that because it stops the spit from coming out, and spit is how coronavirus is spread. But if you really go and look at the real science on it, coronavirus is not just spread in your spit or your snot or your sneeze. Coronavirus is also spread by aerosol, meaning every time you exhale, if you have the coronavirus, you are still spreading that virus out because it comes out in your breath. So if you have a surgical mask and you only have it over your mouth, every time you exhale through your nose and you have the coronavirus, you are breathing the coronavirus out. It doesn't only stick in your spit. They did a study in regards to the effectiveness of surgical masks in regards to stopping penetrating, I think they called it penetration of the virus, and they found that even wearing a surgical mask, 44% of the virus still gets through. So, are you really helping Grandma all that much if you're still allowing 44% of the virus that you're trying to protect her from out through your mask? And if you're not even wearing it over your mouth, you're not wearing it right, you're letting out even more of a percentage of that virus. The downside to this whole thing in society right now is everybody's wearing cloth masks. Hell, you can go online and you see cloth masks here and cloth masks there, cloth mask, which is really almost ineffective in regards to stopping the coronavirus. Again, your argument's going to be, well, it stops the spit from coming out of my mouth. And it does, for the most part, kind of stops the spit. I think if you looked at the real science, though, you'd find out that even if you're talking, spit still comes out of a cloth face mask because there's way too many pores in a face mask for that not to be a thing. And that same study that said 44% of viruses and microbes that get out of a surgical mask stated that 97% of the viruses are getting out of your cloth mask. 97%. So, are you helping Grandma? Yeah, by a whopping 3%. The rest of the virus is still coming out. So it doesn't really seem to matter whether you're wearing the virus or not. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just all opinion, Herb Guy. You don't have any science to back it up. Well, if I didn't have any science to back it up, I most definitely would not be putting it in this video. So, after I get these chickens herded back into the yard where they belong instead of back in the woods, we're going to truck up to the office, and then I'm going to show you some real science, and we'll finish this discussion. Hang on just a minute. Okay, so we're back in the office. In 2015, a medical trial with over 1,700 participants was performed in regards to cloth masks versus surgical masks and their effectiveness. And obviously, the cloth masks way underperformed, stopping only 3% of the particles from getting through. Surgical masks, 44%, but that's still nearly half. On top of that, you have the people that'll argue, well, I have activated charcoal in my mask, which is all well and good, but charcoal's great. Even if your cloth mask has it, it still allows particles of up to 5 microns through, which leaves, the size of a hangar bay for the coronavirus to get out, considering it's only 0.125 microns. Your mask, even if it's cloth mask with charcoal, still doesn't prevent that virus from getting out. I hate to be the one to break that to you. Shortly thereafter, Dr. Shane Nielsen did an article called "The Surgical Mask is a Bad Fit for Risk Reduction," which was peer-reviewed. In his article, he cited Dr. Ulrich Beck, who happens to be one of the most cited scientists in the world, whose work on uncontrollability, ignorance, and uncertainty in the modern age is a base work for many of the projected models that scientists use today. Dr. Beck also happens to be the guy that coined the term risk society. What it all boiled down to was that the mask symbolically protects against infection, just as it represents fear of that infection. It's a vicious cycle that goes over and over. If you go to that article, which is linked down below, you can actually read the whole thing, and it'll kind of maybe make you rethink this whole mask thing. So what if I told you we already tried the mask thing during a pandemic? Later on in his article, Dr. Nielsen stated that the technology was applied outside the operating room in an effort to control the spread of infectious epidemics. In the 1919 influenza pandemic, Masks were available and were dispensed to populations, but they had no impact on the epidemic curve. Now, if your argument is, hey man, that was 100 years ago, the technology has changed. Cloth masks are the norm right now, and they far outstrip the use of surgical masks or anything else for that matter. And as I'm sure you're aware, cloth masks don't offer hardly any protection at all, a whopping 3%. Just a little further down, Dr. Nielsen says, this fear surfaces in public policy. In an annex to the Canadian Pandemic Influenza Preparedness Plan, covering public health measures, the Public Health Agency of Canada does not recommend the use of masks by well individuals in pandemic situations, acknowledging that the mask has not been shown to be effective in such circumstances. And what his whole article boils down to is that masks simply don't work. Not only that, they actually cause more problems than they solve. And not just on a physical level, but on a psychological level. Look at all the stress that this class warfare is causing. The people who choose to use shame as their tool to get other people to agree to their fear. That's really what it is. Now, there's a link to another study down below. You can go read that one for yourself. In the study, it says that even in households, masks are not effective. And I'm not going to take the time to read that one here. You can take some time reading that one on your own, which is part of doing your own research and not relying on anyone else to do it for you. So, why would the government mandate people to wear masks? And there's two schools of thought for that. The one is, it's a government conspiracy and they're just trying to take over everything. However, if you want to use a more practical reason for why they would want to do such a thing, I would have to say, would most likely be the placebo effect. What's the placebo effect have to do with anything, you may ask? Well, and the belief of your treatment working is that it'll work. And if you think what you're taking isn't going to work, then it's never going to work. However, if people can convince enough people that wearing a mask will protect them, most likely it will help to protect them a little. And believe it or not, there's really a reason why only 10% of drugs that are ever approved after testing. That's simply due to the placebo effect. Well, I think I've about talked myself out on this subject. I've included links to everything I've discussed in the description below. And if you disagree with anything I've said, feel free to let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification buttons too. If you like this video, please, please, please consider giving it a like and a share. It'd be nice to see if we can get some civil discourse going. Well, everyone stay safe and have a great day. From the Elder Herb Shop. Goodbye.